Good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of everybody here at Insum, I am super pleased to welcome you to session 3 in our Insum 2019 Fall Webinar Series. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Today's presentation is entitled PinkDB and APEX, Hittin the Low-Code Road. And my name is Mark Ruel from the Insum marketing team, and I'll be your moderator. And our series producer is Marc-André Brassard. Now, please note that your mics are muted, and we'll be taking your questions in writing in the questions pane. Write them out as they come to you, and we'll do our best to field them as we go along during the presentation. Our presenters today are Jackie McIlroy and David Schleis. Jackie McIlroy is an Oracle APEX developer with over 13 years of experience. She currently works at APEX R&D with a focus on APEX Office Print. That's AOP for those who know. She is an Oracle ACE associate, maintains an APEX-related blog, which is at blogspot.com, and is a co-organizer of the Dallas-Fort Worth Oracle APEX Meetup Group. She is also a volunteer admin of apex.world. Jackie enjoys mentoring new APEX developers and helping others create awesome APEX applications. David Schleis is an analyst here at Insum, and he has spent over 30 years in IT, with a majority of that time using Oracle products. And he's built systems on many different platforms using an array of technologies for a wide variety of business customers. So that's it for the introductions. So now, Jackie, David, let's begin. The floor is yours.
Excellent. So thank you everybody for joining us here today and learning a little bit about using PinkDB and APEX together. So what we're going to be doing over the next approximately hour is we're going to be talking a little about APEX in case you are unfamiliar or not up to speed with APEX. We'll do a little background there. Then we're going to talk about how, there's stuff happens behind the scenes in a lot of software and software development. And, most of the time we just don't have to worry about that. Then we're going to get down to business with APEX and PinkDB. Then we're going to show you some data modeler magic and APEX magic. And at the end, you're going to come out convinced. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Jackie, and she's going to tell us just what is Oracle APEX.
Thank you, Dave. Hi, everybody. So for those of you that don't know, I'm going to go over just a little bit about what APEX is. So Oracle Application Express is a low-code development platform that enables you to build scalable, secure enterprise applications with world-class features that can be deployed anywhere. APEX can be used to build desktop and mobile applications for the Oracle database. Oracle APEX enables you to design, develop, and deploy beautiful, responsive, database-driven applications either on premises or in the cloud. You can quickly build reports, forms, charts, calendars, much more, all on top of the data in your database. IT developers and citizen developers who know a little SQL can readily build applications. Oracle APEX can also take advantage of a large majority of the Oracle database features you already have. APEX is used by large and small companies alike across a broad number of industries, and it is used to solve a vast array of business problems, from simple spreadsheet replacement to multi-thousand user banking and insurance applications. APEX can also be an easy way to extend EBS in a certified and supported way. APEX is widely used to rapidly build applications that are needed to meet changing business requirements and maximize competitive advantages. It can be used for extending COT software or to streamline your business processes to meet organization-specific requirements. You can even webify spreadsheets and Microsoft Access applications to provide a true multi-user secure and robust single source of truth application. APEX is also commonly used to modernize old legacy client server applications. Next one, Dave. So what makes APEX so great? Well, the short answer to that is that it's really easy and efficient. Development is done simply inside of a web browser, and you can use a URL to access the development environment or use a URL and user credentials to run an application. You don't need to install any client software. APEX uses a declarative framework, so it stores application definitions in Oracle database tables within the APEX engine, so there's no need for file-based compilation or code generation. All of the data or page processing is performed by PL SQL acting directly on database schemas in the Oracle database. Therefore, APEX is very efficient as data is manipulated directly in the database and results are sent back as HTML pages. The very best part is that it's absolutely free. If you already have an Oracle database, then you already have APEX. APEX is a fully supported feature of the Oracle database with no licensing costs or development for development or deployment of your applications. APEX is also included in Oracle's new always free cloud service. And of course, you can get started for free at apex.oracle.com. So with APEX, it's really easy for you to go from a prototype of an application to production in minutes. At the core of APEX is an engine that provides a variety of fundamental application capabilities and operations, such as application authentication, page and object level access control, database interaction, such as your queries and updates, form validation, session management and protection. They're all available as standard components that can be utilized from every application without custom development. Application objects such as forms, reports, charts, navigation are defined declaratively, enabling applications to be functionally complete in a very short period of time, which increases the agility you have in your application development. So this slide is one of my favorite slides describing Oracle APEX and its low-code nature. So there's different ways to develop applications. Oracle APEX falls into the low-code category, but it can be no-code or even high-code or programmatic. So one of the great things about APEX is that it's a low-code framework, meaning the benefits of low-code development are you get greater productivity in a shorter amount of time and with less cost, but you get greater consistency. Low-code frameworks such as APEX leverage powerful components that provide reporting, data visualization, and form controls. This enables developers to focus more on solving business problems and developing superior solutions while spending less time and effort on mundane, repetitive, lower-level coding that's typically associated with application development. APEX provides a ton of no-code capabilities, such as the wizards, drag and drop functionality, and simple dialog selections in order to create your different application components declaratively. But to build more advanced applications or something a little more custom, it may be necessary to enter small code snippets directly into the page or different regions or items. And this would put you more in the low code category. So you're just programming just a little bit. But you can even take APEX all the way to the programmatic or high code realm to meet more extensive customization requirements or personalizations of your applications as necessary. Does that about explain it, Dave?
Explains it for me. So APEX is really a great example of abstraction in IT. And as you work with the builder and the wizards that Jackie was talking about, all sorts of PL SQL and JavaScript are being generated to build the application based on the doohickeys and widgets that you're monkeying around with. In fact, working in IT means that we're consistently working with abstractions, layers and layers of abstractions. And why do we need so many abstractions? Well, we all know it's because what we ultimately do comes down to flipping little switches on and off really fast. There are many reasons that we need abstractions, and obviously they simplify things. Looking at this example produced by APEX. So within APEX, picking widgets from this list and providing a few details is much simpler than keying in the reams of HTML required that is actually going to put that beautiful plot on the screen. Abstractions hide complexity. They make our work just possible. How much would you get done if you had to set up all of this kind of stuff every time you ran a query, if you had to worry about these things, picking the optimizer, determining a best execution path? To put it simply, abstractions allow us to do our jobs. They keep us safe. By controlling how we interact with the underlying layers, we're prevented from doing something that could do harm. They protect us from ourselves, because it's more difficult to screw something up if I am setting a few parameters on a specific widget than typing in hundreds of keystrokes. You know, they also ensure that the work being done behind the scenes is done in the best way possible. Abstractions make sure that the work is done safely and efficiently. They allow us to work efficiently by encapsulating proven solutions. So we see that the way the database itself works is an abstraction, and the way in which we interact with the database at its most basic level using SQL is also an abstraction. And the tools we use to create the applications are also abstractions, layer upon layer of abstraction. In the last few years, another way of interacting with the database has caught my attention and many others. It's SmartDB. And so it's a different type of abstraction. And it's caught on, or gained traction, I should say, for some of the same reasons that other abstractions have gained popularity. It increases safety and ultimately efficiency. SmartDB has been evangelized most famously by Bryn Llewellyn and Tone Kepelars. And when I first heard them talking about it, it looked something like this. There was a central data repository that was then protected within a shell, a hard PL SQL layer that allowed access to that data only by using API calls, specific PL SQL calls into the database. And on top of that was a connection layer that developers would and their applications would connect to in order to retrieve, to interact with the data. But it was always done in this very controlled fashion by passing through this hard PL SQL safety layer. A more recent depiction of SmartDB definitely has more than 3 layers, and it's getting a little more complicated to work with. So when I saw this, I was honestly intimidated and concerned that my idea of using APEX with SmartDB was just not going to fly. And in addition to the more layers of SmartDB, there seem to come more rules. Perhaps these rules were always in existence, but I was ignoring them or just hadn't heard of them. So I don't have any problem with the first one. That is part of why I wanted to use this type of paradigm to interact with the database, that only by using PL SQL running within the database to interact with the data, that's the only way we could get at it. But then that all of these PL SQL statements had to be written by hand to exploit the full set-based power of SQL. So the explicit mention of PL SQL limits the possibility of using SmartDB to specifically Oracle, and insisting that all statements be written by a human hand eliminates the possibility of code generation. And since my goal is to use APEX with the hard shell or no direct access type of database, SmartDB just didn't seem like much of an option, because in order to make this work, I think we're going to need to generate some code. Enter PinkDB. The PinkDB paradigm was introduced last year in a blog by Philip Salvesberg, and it's based primarily on the principles of SmartDB with some modifications that make it much more practical to apply. It still concentrates on being a secure application architecture designed for database applications, and still concentrates on doing the work in the database as much as possible. You push the processing into that database layer whenever possible. Fortunately for APEX, it's all in the database layer, so that also helps with the PinkDB paradigm. But unlike SmartDB, it is not vendor specific, and it actually encourages the use of code generation. And I like the way Philip puts it on his blog, that PinkDB is the understanding sister of her wise but sometimes a bit stubborn brother, SmartDB. So first of all, why PinkDB? Well, Philip explains this on his blog as well. He wanted to stress the importance of the processing that was going on in the database engine, that was the key, one of the key features of what this database paradigm was going to be used for. So the quest was to find a good letter for this acronym. So he found K worked with, this just worked, PinkDB, that was acceptable for him. But what would the K stand for? Since this was originally given at Kscope, I said, well, this is the obvious answer that he kind of simply ignored, but he settled on knowing, with knowing as an adjective meaning intelligent, clever, smart. And what makes the database knowing or smart is the optimizer. The heart of the database is the processing engine and the optimizer. So what makes PinkDB? It's all about the schemas. First and foremost is the data layer, in which data is stored in a relational database system, taking full advantages of all of the features to keep things consistent, and also using set-based SQL. On top of the data layer is an API layer, an API schema. That is the only way to access the data using stored procedures within the API. You can also have views within this layer. And this layer also uses the guiding principle of least privilege. Only what is absolutely necessary is exposed to this layer from the data layer below. And finally, the connect schema, which has no objects or synonyms in it at all, and no views, no tables, no nothing. And again, it uses this principle of least privilege to keep this layer as safe as possible from unwanted access to the data layer below. So as we said, the data layer contains tables, and that's about it. And based on the title of this presentation, it should come as no surprise that our connect layer is going to contain Oracle APEX. So out of the box, APEX really wants to connect directly, to interact directly with the table data. But in this case, we have this big fat API schema sitting in between the two. What are we going to do? Well, putting the API schema in its place, we can use a view of the table data and have APEX connect directly with that view. Then using, instead of triggers, to call a table API, the view interacts with the data layer below. So to use PinkDB and APEX, all we're going to need is that for every one of the tables, we're going to need a table API written in PL SQL for insert, update, and delete. We're going to need to generate, we're going to need to, of the view DDL, we're going to need to have that for every table. We're also going to need the instead of triggers for insert, update, and delete that we're going to apply to every view for every table. We're also going to need to have to grant, select, insert, update, and delete privileges to our API layer from the data layer. And we're going to need to grant privileges, the same privileges, to the connect layer for each of the views.
David?
And yes?
Sorry, I must interrupt you. We have a question asking about how this will affect performance. I guess it's in your overall schema of using the API layer, I suppose. So yeah, the question is how will this affect performance?
It's going to be based on the complexity of the API layer. So if it's a simple table API, it should have very little impact on performance. But like with all things, your mileage may vary. Only through testing are we going to ultimately determine this. And in the small tests that I have done, there is no recognizable portion of increase in response time. So with all the other, especially since we're dealing with web applications, with all of the other things in between where the user is pushing a button and where the data is, this little bit is not going to make a significant impact.
Okay, we had an add-on to that question, which is I meant using a view instead of triggers.
Using view instead of triggers?
Instead of triggers, yeah.
Well, so you need, because we're using a view, we need the instead of triggers to get to the table API.
Okay, and the person has also added view plus instead of triggers. Does that?
Right. So I'm going to say that still, I'm going to stick with my original answer. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
Oh, sorry, sorry. One more time, Dave. It's and a few other people jumped in. Stephen Furstein has jumped in and said, and instead of triggers, instead of direct table DML. And instead of triggers, instead of direct table DML.
So instead of direct.
They want to know, I think, if the instead of triggers have a performance impact instead of using DML directly.
Well, I'm sure Mr. Feuerstein has a better opinion on that than I do. So if he would like to clarify, that would be fine. This is an introduction to the topic. I am not saying that I have all the answers. I'm trying to get a conversation started along these lines. And I'll leave it at that.
Certainly working. Okay, I'll let you continue.
Dave, I have kind of a question for you here.
You do?
So you're saying that we're going to have to create table APIs for the insert updates deletes. We're going to have to make these views. We're going to have to make these triggers for the insert update delete. We're going to have to do all these grants, and then we need all these privileges and then all these scripts. Do you remember the name of our presentation? Like, it's called the low code road. And if you were listening when I described Apex, like, it's meant to be low code. We're not supposed to use it. I mean, we can use it for high code, but it's supposed to be a low code tool. This doesn't really sound a lot like low code.
Well, you're right. At this point, it does not sound a lot like low code, but that's where the second half of this presentation comes into play.
Okay,
perhaps
try to convince me.
I will try to convince you. Perhaps you've heard of Oracle SQL Developer Data Modeler, and it's a really nice tool for displaying models and generating the DDL to convert a model into a database instance. But one of the most powerful and under advertised and underutilized features of this product is the ability to modify your models using scripts rather than the GUI interface. This feature is referred to as transformation scripting. But in addition to changing your models, to mutating your models, this feature can also be used to read and report on your models. And a complicated kind of report is code generated based on your models. So a couple years ago, I did a presentation that dealt specifically with creating these scripts for Data Modeler. And if you're interested, this presentation is recorded as a webinar at the Insum website, and you are welcome to check it out if you're interested. So as this says, I'm going to show you a little bit of what I've done. So right here in this folder, you can see that there is nothing here. There's nothing behind this curtain. There's nothing in this hat at all. And if we go to this PinkDB schema, you'll see that we have a very simple schema with a couple tables, countries, regions. This is an Oracle demo schema. And what I'm going to do is open up the transformations. And down here deep in my list, I have this particular transformation. I am going to apply this to this schema or to this relational model. So because I am not running in my primary screen, this input box popped up in the inconvenient place of another screen. So what this is doing is it's saying that this application, this script needs to know the name of the source schema. Since the real source schema that we have on apex.oracle.com has a whole lot of letters, I'm just going to call this one source. And I would spell it wrong anyway, so we're going to call this the API. And the connect schema is Apex, of course. And that's that. If we switch back, we will now see that a lot of code has been generated. This is, I'm sure you're all applauding right now. I want to say thank you, thank you. And let's get back to the presentation. So the code that was generated was exactly what was in that list that I had on the other slide. Inserts, updates, deletes, the table API, the view DDL instead of triggers, scripts to grant the privileges, and some install scripts. So for the table API, it's a fairly simple API. We're using just, we declare this row type of the variable, and we're using primary key variables. Defining insert, update, and delete procedures, passing in these table, the row definition records and primary key records where appropriate. So here we see an example of the insert procedure. We have the name of the data schema baked in because it asked me for that to begin with, even though I cheated during the demo. This is what I would have typed in there, and this would have taken too long. We have the DDL to create all the views. Note that the view name is the same as the table name, so that this makes it simpler for the developers to work with. The instead of triggers are, again, what we're doing is we're loading the row variables from the new values. and then we simply call the table API procedure. The script to grant the appropriate rights to the API schema from the data layer, and the privileges to grant the appropriate privileges to the connect layer from the API layer. And then an install script to pull it all together. So with that, Jackie is now going to take the reins and show us what this looks like inside of apex.oracle.com.
Yes, thank you, Dave. You convinced me. It looks pretty easy after you explained it. So this is my application builder inside of Oracle Apex. Like Dave said, this is running on apex.oracle.com. So if you're not familiar with Apex but want to get started, it's a good place to start. If I'm logged into this is the builder. So if I click run, I'll get my beautiful PinkDB application in which I've got a couple of reports here. I have one interactive report showing employees. And then this is really nice out of the box features of Apex. I've just used wizards to create it all. I've got a form to add or edit the employees. And then I've also got a master detail grid. Again, also all made using the wizards straight out of the box with Apex that's showing the different regions and also some countries. But before I go into the application, I want to take a little look behind the scenes inside of the different schemas, the different layers. So we've got the connect layer, our data layer, and our API layer. Each of those correspond to a schema inside of our database. So right now I'm in our object browser. There's nothing here. It's not much to see, but this is a feature of Apex where you can see your database objects directly from your web browser. So the schema is listed right over here in this corner. I've got the Kscope 19 PinkDB schema, which is the one with the really long name. As Dave said, this is our connect schema. There is nothing in here. That's why it's blank. We don't have any tables. We don't have any views. There's nothing here. Inside of our data schema, which is this one here, you're going to see our tables. So we've got our countries table. These are the tables that are used by the application I created. And from here, you can see the different columns and, of course, your data inside there if you wanted to see that. Inside of our third schema, which is our API schema, here we've got one little straggler table from another application, but we're not going to pay any attention to him. And then we've got our views. So these are the views that we're going to use to access our data built on. They all have the same names as the tables, as Dave said, and just this is our way to access it. We've also got our APIs here under packages. So we have our table API for each of the different tables we have that all of this was generated with Dave's script. So if we go back to our application builder and I run the application, you'll see now, of course, we're using our connect layer and I've got my interactive reports and a grid. So behind the scenes here, there's not much to see. It's really, really easy. You can go through the wizards and I'll show you that in just a second, but I just want to show you here, you can see that I'm just using a table, which we're using a view here from our local database. We're using our view, the source views, and then the employees. That's it. There's nothing really special about it to get a really easy interactive report out of the box with Apex. Now I want to go through and actually show you how this is done because it is really simple. So what I'm going to do is create a new page, and we're just going to go through and create a report with a form. And I'm just going to make this really easy, and we'll just call this report. And then our form page, we will call form. And I want my form to be, you can choose, you have a couple of choices. So this is like our low code declarative, easy wizards to create this functionality. Do I want my form to be a normal full-size page or modal dialog? And I'm gonna select the modal dialog there. Let's see, I want to create a new navigation entry for my new page. So I'm going to call this new report. And then all I have to do now is define the source of where I want to pull my data. So for us, we're going to use our local database. We're going to use a table. In our case, it's really going to be a view, but I want to use it from our API layer where our views live. Then here, I'm going to come in and let's do our employees. There, it's just automatically going to pull all the fields over for me to use on my report, and that's perfect. I don't have to change anything. Here, it wants me to select the primary key that I'm going to use. All I have to do there is I know that my employee ID is the primary key, so I select it, and then I click create. So this, just clicking a few buttons of the mouse, I have 2 pages created. I have a report page, and I also have, if I go up 1 page, I have my form. So I'm going to go ahead and run this just so you see what Apex has done for you out of the box. I've got a new tab here, and I've got my interactive report. I have a button that I can use to pull up my form, and I have an edit link where I can edit it. With a few customizations, we can make it even better. So a lot of times with Apex, you don't want to see, let's say, our manager. We don't really want to see the manager's ID. We'd rather see the manager's name showing instead. So here you can just change the type. So I'm going to make this a select list instead of a number field. I don't want it to have the word ID there, so I'll change it just to be manager. And then I'm going to use a list of values. So I've defined in my shared components some list of values, and these are just really easy queries, nothing special. You're just querying those views that we created in the API layer. So now when I save this and run my page here, instead of having the manager ID, I've got a drop-down list of all of the different managers' names. So that's really easy out of the box. There's one tiny thing that we need to do to remember to do if we're using this paradigm here with Apex. When we process the data, there's a setting that's called return primary keys after insert, and you need to turn that off. The views aren't built to return your primary key back into that. It's gonna cause you an error. So it's really easy to see. If you left that on, you would get an error, but we just need to turn it off for when we're using this kind of API with Apex. Let's see. If I go back here, we can do the same thing with our department ID, just clean this up. I want to make this a select list. It's really, really simple here with Apex. So I've just got departments. And if you want to see what those are all about, if you're new to Apex, there's a place in Apex where you define shared components. These can be used all over your application. And all I'm doing here is querying that view, right, for the pink departments table. Nothing special is being done to accommodate the PinkDB paradigm besides using those views. That now I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go back over to our report page, which was page 2. Whoops. So here, when we defined our interactive report, it automatically, as I showed in the wizard, it pulled over all the columns in the table. which is great, except I don't really want to see my employee ID. I'm going to hide that. Here also we have a salary. I would like for my salary to have kind of a specific look, so it looks like a salary. So I'll choose that here. And then the same idea for the manager ID and the department ID. I want those to be based off a list of values. So I'm going to go ahead and change them here really quickly and take off the word ID. So select my department list of values, take off the word ID. Now when I run this page, I've got a really nice looking report. I can see my salary is formatted the way I wanted to. I see the names of the managers and the departments instead of the IDs, which is helpful to the end user. And I can also come in here and modify any of the data that I want to modify straight out of the box. So this is as low code really as you can get. The master detail is the same thing. I won't go through creating the master detail, but it's really nice out of the box. You've just got, you're just using wizards to create your master and your detail. And as you can see here, the query is using just the pink regions view. And the same thing for countries. All we had to do to tie these together was to define our master column. So this is we know that the countries region has a master of the regions, which is really confusing. But and then anytime when you're running the page, anytime you click a row of the master region, so I do Americas here, you're going to get a refresh down here of your countries. So this is really nice. Like if you want to add a row here, like say I want to pull out South America as its own region, we'll save that. And I want to add a country. Let's add Peru here and save it. So, I mean, everything, this is all calling, just using the native functionality in your processes. We've got one out of the box interactive grid row processing for the regions and the same thing for countries. There was no code written to do any of that besides, of course, Dave generating his API. This is going to hit those instead of triggers that Dave was talking about. Are there any questions here? Or Dave, do you have anything to add?
No, you did a lovely job.
Thanks.
We do have one question, which is, can we choose lock row here?
Can we choose lock row?
Or, yes.
Here? Or I'm not exactly sure where. So this is
a DML process.
Yeah, so lock row is here. Yes, it's set to yes.
All right. Any other questions on this segment? We have one question for David, which we'll give to David at the end.
I'll go ahead and change back over to you, Dave.
One more question. Is pessimistic locking working in PinkDB?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. So something to research.
And we can certainly get back with any answers you can give us, David. We'll be happy to.
Very good. Okay, so Jackie is done demonstrating, and she did an admirable job. I'm sure you'll all agree.
Well, you made it easy, Dave.
Well, that's lovely to hear. So basically, that concludes our presentation. It's just that I want to reiterate that working in IT means that you're working with abstractions, and the database and SQL are already abstractions. PinkDB is another abstraction layer on top of standard SQL. Out of the box, Apex is not really PinkDB friendly, but using some views instead of triggers and a table API, or apparently direct DML, will allow Apex to use PinkDB seamlessly. Also, SQL Developer Data Modeler is an excellent tool for generating the code based on your existing table structures. And that's it. I want to thank you for attending, listening, and I really want to thank Jackie for all of her help and her excellent guidance.
Thank
Great.
you, Dave.
Well, all right, David, that's time for that question. I'll put it to you now. You said the connection layer has no objects, in parentheses, logical, not even synonyms. But if it has no synonyms, we either need public synonyms or we have to expose schema names of the API layer or layers to the outside world, which is a bit of a security issue. Or am I missing something? Wouldn't it be acceptable to have synonyms in the connection layer?
It, of course, is acceptable to have synonyms in the connection layer. As Philip says, when he defined this paradigm, exceptions are always, they happen in the real world. And his big deal is, and I agree, is that if you're going to make an exception, that it be documented. And that's all. But synonyms would in fact prevent the need to have to know what the next schema layer is. That is correct.
Okay, and we have an additional question, which is, where can we find the APIs to generate code? The table APIs and views, TAPI and views.
If you, right now, I'm going to get them up on GitHub, but they're not there yet. If you want to contact me directly, I can send them sooner. Schleis at Insum. And I'm sure there will be information along with this along with this presentation once it's posted.
And a more general question that follows that up is, what value or benefit does PinkDB have over traditional DML/DB access?
Basically, it's protecting the database behind a layer so that you can control access much better. So you are guaranteeing that nothing besides the applications can access the data. And even when the developers are developing, you can control their access much better than allowing them direct access to the database itself. It's a protection and a stabilization mechanism.
So it is an extra layer, but you do have the benefit of maintainability and security.
Security is a big part of it, yes.
All right. Are there any other questions? Please don't be shy.
Sounds pretty quiet out there.
Okay, it doesn't appear to, we don't appear to have any other questions. So if that's the case, then we'll close up the webinar. Last chance.
And if anybody does have questions, please contact me directly. I am on Twitter at Schleis.
There is a question. What if we want to call LPL/SQL functions from the source DB? Couldn't you control protections by restricting developers to select privs and using table APIs?
there are other mechanisms to accomplish the same goal. This is one of these mechanisms. So I'm not saying that this is the only way to protect the database. I'm saying this is a good way to protect the database. And the way that I have chosen to use for this presentation. So this is not exclusive. I'm not trying to say that at all.
All right. If there are no other questions, I'll conclude the presentation.
So thanks again, everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Jackie and David. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the great presentation. And I'd also like to cordially invite all of you to our next webinar, which is Wheels Up, a case study of moving an airline into the cloud, presented by Cloud and DBA Practice Director Luc Dimanche. That's next Wednesday, October 23rd at the same time. And we'll be sending out invitations to register to you soon. And of course, I hope you'll continue to join us for the series right up until December, because we have a full calendar that you can check out at insum.ca/resources/webinars. And that concludes it for today. And a recording of this session will, of course, be made available this week for you, and we'll email you the link. And on behalf of everyone here at Insum, thank you for your time, and we all hope to see you soon. Goodbye.